All right, let's talk a little bit about chain lube. Should you lube your chain or not? Some would say you don't have to lube your chain, and I'm here to tell you you need to lube your chain. All right, why would they say you don't have to lube your chain? Well, they would say that if you have an X-ring chain or an O-ring chain, that they're internally lubed and you don't need to lube your chain at all. And you can just let it run dry and it'll last just as long as anything else. Now, there is some truth to that a little bit. That in the concept is that the O-ring or the X-ring has little grooves in it and holds the oil in a little bit better, or the grease in, and you can see that when you take the chain apart. And the O-ring is supposed to hold the grease in as well. A standard chain, like a race chain, doesn't have O-rings or X-rings, and they have got to be oiled or greased all the time. They run out, and they will wear out the chain, the sprocket, and everything. Now, here's where it gets a little sideways. So you say a regular chain that's a race chain has to be lubed. And what we're thinking about is the little rollers. And we're thinking about the little piece that goes through the chain. There's a little roller on that. And I can show you what that looks like. Let's get down here. All right, so down on the chain, if you take a look, there's a reason I brought these little things. You look down here, that's the little roller right there. And those little rollers spin around pretty freely. Most chains that spins around, if you go and grab them with a pair of pliers, they'll turn pretty easily. So they're saying that if you grease that on a non-O-ring chain, you're going to get grease down in there and it's going to help lube those up so those little buggers don't wear out. I'm not as concerned on an X-ring or O-ring chain, not quite concerned about that piece. The contact piece I'm worried about is right here where your sprocket and your chain are meeting. Now that little roller is supposed to roll inside this little thing. Now it still needs to contact that, and as it goes through here, once it gets tension on it from about here, it should kind of roll along, and if it's greased up properly on the internals, it's not going to wear out your chain. But there is heat on these chains, and if you could do a little experiment. So your little experiment would be wash your chain, clean it up with some WD-40 or something, and go run it down the freeway for a half an hour and fill your chain and fill your sprocket and see how hot it is. Now lube it up with something like I mean, I don't care what you use, we aren't sponsored by anybody. This is Lucas. I actually haven't even used these. I got like 10 cans of these that are just sitting on the shelf. I'm always using this product from Maxima. They call it chain wax. It's a lube. It doesn't fling off as much. The thing that you're going to notice right away when you come back is that chain is really loud and your sprocket's really hot, and the chain's pretty hot too. Once you lube it up with some chain lube, take that out on that same route, go down the freeway and come back, that sprocket and chain are going to be a lot cooler, not as hot. And heat is going to destroy your sprocket and your chain. And we've got a lot of proof of this from this shop, having brand new X-ring, O-ring chains put on bikes, riding from here. We're in west part of the United States in California. A guy rode from here to the Great Lakes, and by the time he got there, I think he didn't lube his chain once. So we lubed it here, he left and rode all that way, and by the time he got there, his chain and sprocket were completely worn out. They were brand new chain and sprocket, and they were both really good quality. Other guys we've taken, and they've gone with our recommendation, and they oil their chain or grease their chain every 700 miles along their trip. And they've made trips from here across the United States into Europe, and 3 years later are still on the same chain and sprocket. Myself included, I can tell when my chain starts to get dry, it starts to get loud and it starts to get noisy. And I lube it up and it's nice and quiet. It stays cooler. And that lasts about 700 miles or so. So like on a long day, we go riding, I lube my chain every day. And they stay quiet. and they last forever. I don't have chains go bad on me. On my race bikes, on my touring bikes, on my adventure bikes. So yes, I do say you need to lube your chain. Make sure it's lubed every 700 miles, or if you're washing your bike, it's good to lube your chain right after that. If you're cleaning your chain, clean it with a WD-40, a little brush. Another thing people badmouth, but I just love these little things. And the brushes, you can just use a regular brush. They're pretty cheap. Just a little brush and a little WD-40. Brush it off, rinse it off with some water. I use one of these little spirals thing. I don't even know who makes them, but I see them on Amazon and all over the place. They're pretty cheap. And I wrap it around the chain, and then I spin the back wheel and hold on to this. And I keep spraying WD-40 into this, and it cleans my chain really good. Then I just hose off with a little bit of water, and immediately I go through and lube that chain. So the other thing that chain lube does is keeps your chain from rusting. And once those little, I'll go back down here and look at these little things here again. These little things, even though they're made out of stainless steel on most chains, once they rub enough and this chain is exposed to salt, air, or just water and exposure, they start to rust. And once they start to rust, they build up even more heat. So keeping a little bit of layer of oil or a little bit of lube on them keeps them, they just don't rust because they've got that coating of lube. So once again, yes, lube your chain. Thanks, guys.